Ah,
Did that work?
it did. It said recordings in progress. So you are recording us right now, I guess.
I could wait for a couple minutes till the rest get here.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's just about 6 o'clock now, so I think we can get
Okay.
started. We'll before we actually get into the tune, we'll just do some simple exercises and one of my tuning chord schemes as we wait for the rest of the people to show up. Because we've only got about half the class. Yeah, I don't see Meredith here, so as long as you're recording, I think we're okay, Davis. Good deal. Then we won't worry about whether it's being recorded. For all we know, Meredith could be en route, in transit somewhere, so we won't worry about that now. Of course, the next step will be figuring out how you're going to transfer it to YouTube or some format that we can all access.
Yeah, I'll caucus with Meredith on that one.
Okay, maybe Bernard can help you with that too. Yeah. All righty. Well then, let's go ahead and get started. So last week we pretty much finished up as best we're able the elements of the first tune we've worked on, Rory Dahl's Port, the Scottish tune from the Scottish harper Rory Dahl. And there were two Rory Dahls. I think I mentioned this at one point. There were two harpers, one Irish and one Scottish, who both had the same name, Rory Dahl, except that they had different final names. There was Rory Dahl O'Cathan and Rory Dahl Morrison. Morrison was the Scottish one, and he's the one who composed that tune, as far as we know, Rory Dahl's Port. So I think we're pretty much finished up with that, but if anybody has any questions you want to ask me about that before we move on, now might be a good time. Don't want to spend too much time with it because I'd like to get moving with the next tune, but any pressing questions on that tune, which is basically just one whale of a finger exercise on some of those variations. So if not, I will carry on. And let's start with, since not everybody's quite here yet, let's start with just simple arpeggio exercise, because we've got a lot of arpeggio-like movements in this next piece, Princess Augusta. And this is a delightful Scottish harp tune, actually composed by a fiddler, not a harper. But they swap tunes back and forth all the time anyway, between instruments. So what I'm going to run by you now are what I call the tuning chords. And there's two different sequences of tuning chords. This is the first one that I learned a long time ago, in which we run through basically the inversions of the 1-4-5 chord. And we are in the key of G still, just so you know. So make sure your F levers are on. You've got F sharp, and that's the only sharp, and no flats. And we start on the string above the blue string. And just for reference, here is my middle C. So you can see that. There's middle C. And C, D, E, F, G. We're starting on G above middle C. And we'll start with just a very simple G arpeggio. So we've got the fingers 4, 3, 2, 1 on G, skip the string B, skip the string D, skip 2 strings to G, the octave. Okay, let's position those again and play it again. Okay, now position on those 4 again. We're not going to do the standard arpeggio exercise. I'm going to have you do some inversions now. So find the same position, which is going to be G, B, D, G, like we just played, a G arpeggio. Now take those 2 middle fingers, the second and third finger, and move them up 1 string to C and E. So now you have fingers 4, 3, 2, 1 on G, C, E, G. So you've got the big gap at the bottom of the chord. That's called an inversion, because it's actually a C chord, but we're not starting on the note C. We're actually starting on the third note of the triad. And therefore, this technically would be called the second inversion of C. You don't have to know that for the sake of this exercise, but it's an inversion of C. And so again, G, C, E, G, okay? In which you still have the fourth finger and thumb on G's in the octave apart. Just move the two middle fingers up one. Now we're going to pretty much shift around all the fingers for the third chord. There's just 3 chords in this sequence. Now we're going to reposition all 4 fingers to 4, 3, 2, 1 on A, C, D, F. F being F sharp, of course. A, C, D, F sharp. So C and D are right next to each other. So what we've got there is technically a third inversion of a D7 chord, which sounds interesting. The 7 being the odd one out. That's why you have 2 strings right next to each other, C and D. Because if you were to play a D arpeggio in the root position, it would start down here. And it wouldn't have a C in it. But if you move that thumb to C, that's a D7 chord, because C is 7 notes above the root, D. So now we invert that to get this. The A, C, D, F. And now go back to the first one, the standard G arpeggio. Okay? Just those 3 chords. Now, why am I showing you those 3? These are what we call the tuning chords. If all 3 of those chords in quick succession, this is just kind of a quick audio check on your harp, if it sounds in tune. If each of those chords sound harmonious, then you can be reasonably sure your harp is in tune. So it's just like a real quick tuning check. We call them the tuning chords. So that's one version of tuning chords. There's another one that's that moves in a different way that I'd like to show you, and it doesn't even use the 7, because you don't actually need it to still hear all the notes in relative harmony to each other. And that's the reason behind those 3 chords. You're making use of all the notes between G and G in different aspects of harmony to each other. But here's another way to do that. Now we're only using 3 fingers. We're going to start on the G triad. So 3, 2, 1 on G, B, D. That's the first 3 notes of the G arpeggio. If you're using fingers, you're just using 3 now. 3, 2, 1. Now keep that low G and move the upper 2 fingers to C and E. So now we've changed it to an inversion of C. Now take all 3 fingers and move each one up 1 string. So now you have the notes A, D, F. Whenever I say F, you know I actually mean F sharp, because it automatically is F sharp, unless we take that letter off. So that's the third one. And now we're going to go up 1 more, which takes us back to the 1 chord, G, except in an inversion up higher. So that one is B, D, G, B, D, G. So that sequence of 4 chords is another way to cross-check. In some ways, I like it better because it doesn't have that 7th thrown in there. Well, that's an interesting harmony check too. But if you do this sequence just very quickly, if they all sound harmonious, you've just gone through all the notes of the G scale from G to G and heard them in relative harmony to each other. Again, it's just a quick tuning check. Of course, all this that you've done with the right hand, you can also do with the left down here. Now you can arpeggiate them like I just did, or you can play them as solid chords. And this way you can also do the 2 hands together in their respective octaves. Backwards. You can actually extrapolate this out to keep going up the scale. there I went up a full octave of inversions of the 1, 4, and 5. Never mind that. So just one more time. The notes are, if you wanted to write them down, G, B, D, then G, C, E, then all 3 fingers up 1, A, D, F sharp, and now finally B, D, G, which you're back on the G chord, the 1 chord, except in its first inversion. Okay, so that's just a nice little exercise to know, because I use it all the time when I'm tuning my harp, and then I go through and I listen, because there could be subtleties in there's always subtleties in tuning to make sure that everything is going to sound good relative to each other. And so when you run through something like this, both hands, gives me a sense, okay, those notes are all sounding in good tune within that 2-octave range, because I did both hands at the same time. Now I just run up the relative chords up the scale. Or you can just, as far as tuning is concerned, you really only need the octaves, and the same going down. And there you've got your harp in tune. Nice and simple. No problem, nothing to it. It takes a little experience and practice really to get that. Well, first of all, the sensitivity to the sound that you know you're listening for. That all takes time and experience, but let's move right along now to Princess Augusta. This lovely and stately tune is like a march. And we started this last week, so let's just carry on. But starting from the beginning, once again, the first part of the melody starts like so. The first 2 notes happen to be lead-in notes. If you're looking at the music, the beat of the first measure actually comes in on the 3rd note. But again, you don't even have to think about that. If you're learning this by ear, you're just listening for the direction and inflection of the melody. But that's the very first part. It's almost like following a scale and then jumping a big interval of a 5th down to low G. So the high G, so you've got your fingers, you could start out with all 4 in position if you wanted to. 4, 3, 2, 1 on the low G, rather G above middle C, then all the way a 5th up to D with the 3rd finger, and E right above that, the 2nd finger, and then skip F to G with the thumb. So G, D, E, G. That's the succession of notes from downward to upward, but we're actually going to start with the top note and play them downward, like so. Okay. That's just the first 4 notes of the tune, including those 2 lead-in notes. So it's with the thumb, the high G, E, D, and then you've got those 2 notes are quarter notes from D to G. So now to catch the rest of that phrase. Okay, and that part is, here are the notes, B, C, D, B, D, G, G. Okay, so now we've really caught the first phrase of this melody. If we put that together like so, from the beginning. And I won't fuss too much about fingering because it's actually pretty straightforward. There'll be a couple of places where I will point it out, but right here, you're really just almost like going up and down scales, arpeggios, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 3, 2, 1, B, C, D, 4, 4. So let's repeat that a few times to get you well used to the melody of this piece. So da da dum bum ba da 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 dum bum bum. Okay, 2 G's. If you're looking at the music, you'll notice that's taking us through the first 2 measures, except there's one more note right at the end of that second measure that again acts like a lead-in. So we'll get to that one. Okay, for now we're just going to repeat what we have done so far, starting with the 2 lead-in notes on the high G. So ready, begin. G, E, D, G, B, C, D, B, D, G, G. Okay, and we're just going to do that again. Ready, begin. And again. One more time. Now comes the fun part. Here we've got this, what I call stair stepping, going down, down 2 steps, up 1, down 2 steps, up 1. Okay, and if you get that far, that takes you to the halfway point of the A part, okay? I'll tell you what the notes are in a second. So here's what they are. First is F to G, up high. Now skip down to D up to E. Now skip down to B up to C. Now skip down to A up to B, and then to G. There we've now traversed an octave, like so. Okay, so I'll just call those notes out one more time. F, G, D, E, B, C, A, B, G. Now we're going to skip down to E. There's a longer note now. And then F, G, down to D. Aha, finally, we're at a good stopping point. So this is what that whole phrase would sound like, what I call the stair stepping section. Okay. And the fingering, very straightforward here. It's just 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 4. Okay. Now there you want to jump to the third finger, to the E, and then 2, 1. You could go down to 3, but I suggest 4. Using the 4 to land on that low D because you've got to jump way the heck up here again. So you want to have that nice stretch between your 4th and your 1st finger. Now we've got a complete phrase, and here's what it would sound like if we were to repeat it, which in fact it kind of will, and then put an ending to it. So here's what we've got. This is the first half of the A part of Princess Augusta. And they could go right back to the beginning and repeat. You could just keep repeating that. And in fact, we will more or less repeat it until we come to the point, the 8th measure, we've got to put an ending on it. So here's what it'll sound like all together. And I'm going to throw in the left hand so you get a sense of the rhythm and cadence of what the accompaniment is going to do. Okay, that's what we've done so far. Now it comes all the way back up to high G and repeats. But now it's good. We're going to put a different ending for the last 2 measures. So we'll come to that. And that's the whole A part. That's the whole A part. That whole thing repeats. So, because we have two A's. So let's get that, let's go back again, just get the first two measures. We'll take that in sections. And I recommend that when you practice this, you practice it in sections. Don't try to just sort of plow all the way through the piece and go back to the beginning and plow all the way through again. It's good to take it in small sections that you repeat and repeat and repeat. Then go to the next section, repeat, repeat, repeat. Go back to the first and put the first two sections together. Now you've got that going as a repeat and so forth. So you gradually build the piece by sections, by measures until you've got the whole tune by the end of it. So here again, the first two measures. Ready, begin. Okay, the next two measures, the stair stepping, remember? And there you're pretty much at the halfway point. So now I'm going to kind of carry on with this. Just follow along as best you can and know that you can always come back to refer to this instruction on video. So here we go. Now I'm going to play, actually, let's repeat that stair stepping and then let's go back to the beginning and play the two sections together, 4 measures. So here's the second 2 measures, the stair stepping. Da, ba, da, ba, dee, da, dee, da, dee, da. Except the rhythm is this. Okay, one more time, just that together. Ready? A little slower. Begin. Okay. Now it's only challenging because of the stair stepping nature of it. Fingering wise and actually performance wise, it's not a difficult thing to do. This will just take you time and practice. Even for you beginners who may think you're closer to early beginner, this tune is well within your capacity to learn and to play. Okay, but I'm going to press ahead and now play the full 4 measures, which takes us to the halfway point of what I call the A part of Princess Augusta. Okay, so that's the first 4 measures. Now, at this point, we come back to continue forward to the next 4 measures. We come back to that high G and start out exactly the same way. And at this point, instead of going through the stair stepping, now we have an ending to put on that works like so. Excuse me. It's my favorite alder trees out there have been wreaking havoc on me for this past week. All right. So let me take you through that now. So you know the first 2 measures of this because they're the same as the first 2 measures at the beginning. Okay, so let's take that. Ready, begin. Now we come to the last 2 measures, which constitutes what I call the ending of the A part. We come back up to the high G as if we were starting again the same way. But now we simply put this ending. So here's the note sequence there, the last 2 measures. Now, when I say that it starts with this high G, that actually is, if you're looking at the music, is actually the lead-in notes in the previous measure. The G and the E, and then coming down to D, B, A, B, G, two long Gs. Well, it would be two long Gs, except that you're going to go back up to the top and start all over again. So you end up with something like this. Now repeats. That was one complete time, 8 measures through the A part, and that whole thing just repeats again. The ending. Okay, and once you've accomplished that much, you're halfway through the piece, pretty much. All right, so let's work on the second 4 measures. Okay, we've got the first 4, and don't worry if you haven't actually got it. You can continue working on this. Just follow along as best you can. So here's the second 4, which start out just like the beginning. First 2 measures just the same, starting on the high G. So the only thing you need at this point are just the last 2 measures, which include those lead-in notes. And those notes are this: G, G, E, D, B, A, B, G, and G again. 2 Gs at the end. So now let's say we were to look at this tune purely mentally, intellectually, the structure, let's look at it in groupings of 2 measures. Okay, and then we'll see how things recapitulate and repeat. So the first 2 measures are this. The second 2 measures, so there's going to be 4 groupings, right? 4 groupings of 2 measures for a total of 8 measures. The next 2 measures, 3 and 4, are the stair stepping. The third group is the same as the first group, exactly the same, like the beginning. And the fourth group is the ending, the last 2 measures. And there you have it, by Jove. So now I'm going to play the all 8 measures, and just follow along as best you can. And if you can't play along exactly note for note, don't worry about it, but be listening for that structure of the tune, which really works in phrases of 2 measures, right? So here we go from the beginning, nice and slow. And I'll just lightly bring in the left hand so you can be hearing how that harmony works. And it's pretty simple too, you'll find when it comes time to learn that. So from the beginning, all the way through 8 measures. Here's the first 2. Second 2. Third 2, same as the first 2. And the last 2 are the ending. In a sense, that's the simplest one of all, the ending, the last 2 measures. So now I'm going to play it a couple of times through as if I was playing the piece, but just nice and slow, and follow along or listen as best you can. Here we go. The A part of Princess Augusta played twice. So in other words, if you're looking at the music, I'm actually following the indications of the repeat signs, and I'm going to go back to the beginning after I've played 8 measures and play those same 8 measures again. Okay, so here we go. The ending. Excellent. Beautiful. And I'm going to give you a little break from the intensely intellectual exercise of following a melody like this and take you off into the realm of harmony before we move on to the B part melody. I'm going to show you what the left hand does on the A part, because it starts out very simply on the G triad. Just think in terms, yes, it's broken up on the music, but you'll see how that works. It's very simple. So your left hand is going to position on the lower G, G below middle C, three fingers, 3, 2, 1, G, B, D. That's a triad. If you pluck them all three together, you get a nice sounding G chord, right? Remember, make sure that G is starting below middle C. Okay, but we're going to break it up by playing G by itself and then the B, D together following. So it's all following the beat. This is a 4/4 time, and each one gets one beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's all it's doing for a long time. You're going to do that pattern of G followed by BD 6 times altogether. There's 2 of them per measure. So the first 3 measures are just that pattern. And you have 2 more. And then you have a nice big C down below. And in this case, it's written leaving out the third, but you can put the third in there, pretend it's just like a big C arpeggio. Remember those arpeggios? That's a pretty archetypal form. And now the next chord is an inversion of G, written this way for those who have lap harps. Okay, so here I'm going to give an alternate version of that last chord at the end of the 4th measure. For those of you with bigger harps, you can go down to a low G and play G, the 5th, D, and then all the way up to that B. So what you have here is an open 5th with an extended B. It gives you a 10th chord, which sounds really, really sweet. And I'm sure some of you have done chords like this before. So that's what you can do in place of that inversion. So you big harps can do it down here. You little harps can do it up here. It almost sounds the same. You just don't have that low G on it on the lap harp, okay? So I just wanted to give those 2 versions of that chord, that last chord in the line. So let's try that together. So I'm going to play the melody lightly and you follow with your left hand. So first you just start on that 3-fingered triad with the root followed by the 3rd and 5th. Or fingers 3 and 2, 1 together. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Now remember that my melody is going to start with 2 notes before you come in with the left hand, because these are lead-in notes. And you come in here. Okay, let's do that. Ready, together, begin. We're going to do this 6 times together, all together. Now you're going to go down to the big C chord, and then the G. Either the low big one or the inverted one. Okay, let's do that again. So now, as you guessed, your next part will come right back to the same pattern again, but this time there'll only be 2 measures of this pattern. So 4 altogether instead of 6. Now we come to the last 2 measures. We're going to have some solid chords. A solid G triad. And now down to a big D chord. written as a triad, but you could do, no, it's written as a full 4-finger chord. And now you come back up to G, but guess what? We're going to do something very special with it. We're going to turn it into a suspended chord, which then resolves like so. This is the 8th measure. The very last measure is starts with that suspended G. A G suspended is taking the triad. So look at that triad. Have all 3 fingers in place. Now take your middle finger, number 2 finger, and move it up 1 to the C. Now, if you play that note instead, you end up with something called a suspended chord. It's called suspended because it literally puts the listener in a state of suspension. And the suspension always needs to be resolved, always needs to be resolved. So then you resolve it by going back to the open triad. So first it's G, C, D, and then it resolves with G, B, D. Okay, and it will sound like this. Suspended, resolve. So all together, here's how the left hand will work. And you can just follow me. I'll play the melody lightly and I'll call out the left hand. Start that pattern now with G, B, D, G, B, D. Here we go. G, B, D. 6 times. Now get ready to go down to the low C. And now the G, either inversion or the low G. That's the halfway point. Now we come back and start the same again. Now we do a solid G, down to a solid D, back up to G suspended, and resolved. Okay, so that's what your left hand does. When it comes to putting the 2 hands together, that will take some practice, of course. And again, take it in small sections, 1 measure at a time, knowing that the first 2 notes play by themselves and then you come in with the left. That's the first measure. And then, so you literally take it note by note and try to line them up together, knowing that the left hand keeps a steady beat. It's pretty much a steady beat. The right hand's got fast notes and slow notes, fast notes and slow. So sometimes there's 2 notes for every one of the left hand. Sometimes they're in unison with each other. Okay, so here's what it's going to sound like together. One more time, a part altogether of Princess Augusta. Suspended, resolved. Then you repeat the whole thing. Yeah, sounding beautiful so far. And there you've got the main, gist of the piece. Now we go into the B part, okay? And here the melody wanders up in the higher register quite a bit. Now this big arpeggio. That's the first, let's see. Yeah, the first 4 measures. Now what happens here that's interesting, and that's the second chord. So we have a total of 8 measures, right? For the B part of this tune also. And this tune is one of those structured A part, B part. But a solid tune, and most tunes structured this way would be played with the A part played twice and the B part played twice, or we refer to it as 2 A's and 2 B's. Here's the structure of the tune. However, Princess Augusta does something a little creative here. On the B part, it does not repeat the whole B section. It only repeats the second half of it. Okay, and that's why you see when you come down, I just realized that there is, no, this is good. So you go through and you play all the way from the, beginning of the B is at the end of the second line, right? You play all the way to the end, but then you go back to where the repeat sign is, and that's halfway through the B. You're playing the second half of the B. So, and that concludes the tune. So here's how that would sound. Here's the whole B part. And now you just repeat the last, that was all 8 measures. Now you just repeat the last 4. And there it does a nice little segue into the 4 and 1, the 4 chord, the 1 chord, with a little inversion. So we'll get into the chord part of that, because this is also the first place where we'll introduce a relative minor chord. So let's get through that melody first. I should stop at this point. I just realized I've been blathering nonstop for 40 minutes without giving you a chance to ask me any questions. So does anybody have any questions so far? Feel free to ask or point out anything. And if you like, just unmute yourself and blur it out, and I'll wait a few seconds or forever wait till the next time that I ask for questions. Everybody's doing okay so far?
I have a quick question.
Okay,
so,
good.
So on the music on the very 4th line, where it has that line that's above where it says 1 and then 2, are those are those different endings?
Yes. Yep,
Okay.
exactly. What that means is the first ending and then the second ending.
Okay.
And so when you go back to repeat that section, you skip 1 and go straight to 2.
Okay.
So that you still end up, so right, that's a very good question. So that's that's how you put an ending to the phrase without having to rewrite the whole thing again. You just tell by notation that you repeat this whole section, except that when you get to here, where you see 1 and 2, go to 2 the second time and skip 1. And so you end up with the same number of measures, right? You've always got the even 4s and 8s. Good. Any other questions? That's a good one about notation, basically notation. Great. So let's go ahead on through the melody now of the B part, and then you'll have this whole tune. You know, notice something kind of interesting, just a little side note, structurally about this tune, is that it really follows the pattern and the mood of the pentatonic. Because notice how it begins. Of course, you do have a passing tone of C there, but you hear a lot of this. So that's all pentatonic, meaning a 5-tone scale, which was very indicative of the early music of the Celtic tradition. Anyway, more on that later. So now we get into the B part. So we have the lead-in notes. We're going to start with the lead-in notes because that's how everything begins, with that same. You've always got that da dum da dee dum bum ba da dee dee da dee dee dum ba dee dee da dee dee dum ba dee da dee dum, always leads in. D da G E always leads. So those are the lead-in notes right before the beginning of the beat part where you see the repeat sign. Okay, that's where we start. And now we come to that first measure. Now when you come to that fourth note, here's where I pick up the hand. It's a good idea to have a little indication for fingering here, because now all of a sudden you're moving around up high above that. So the thumb plays that. When the thumb comes back up to G, now move the third finger up to that same G to continue on with. Okay. So there's a lot of notes there. That the second measure of the B has the most 16th notes all the way through it. And when it gets to that, repeating that section, you've got that same thing again. Da 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 da. So let me just run through what those notes are, just nuts and bolts, including the lead-in notes of G and E. Then you have from the beginning of the measure of the B part, and I could have put a little B. Sometimes I do that. A at the beginning and B at the middle for the beginning of the B part. So that from the beginning of that measure, D, D, E, G, G, A, B, A, G, B, A. So see how it does kind of an interesting turn. It does a little turnaround where it's going up and down those three notes, but then it skips and lands on the middle one. Okay, so let's practice that. Even just that much. Even though we haven't got, we've got three more notes to that. I should complete that. Okay, so I'm going to call out the notes again, including the lead-in notes, the two notes at the beginning, before the beginning of that measure. Okay, G, E, D, D, E, G, G, A, B, A, G, B, A, C, B, A. So it's all 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. We're really using three fingers all the way through that whole sequence. And once you've got that much, which ends on the note A, the rest of it's going to be a piece of cake, because now it just goes down these big extended arpeggios on quarter notes. Sorry. Sorry. See, I can throw you off because there's so many intervals, sometimes thirds, sometimes fifths, sometimes fourths. So that's why this takes practice. And when you practice this diligently in sections and keep repeating them, you actually begin to build up a muscle memory, okay? And that your fingers will be able to follow the pattern more readily, okay? So since we've just got 10 minutes left here, let's kind of finish this up as best we can. And so let's take that first two measures again and just follow along as best you can. Again, starting with the two lead-in notes from the previous measure. Ready, begin. Okay, those last three notes were C, B, A, right? 1, 2, 3. Now 1 is going to come to the B for this next big extended arpeggio going down. B, G, D, low G. So it's really extending across a whole 10th interval. All right. And that's the third measure. And then the fourth measure ends with this. B, E, E. So the third and fourth measures, the third one being that big extended arpeggio, high B, G, D, low G. Now come up to B, up to E, E, 2 E's, okay? Okay, and then we're gonna repeat that essentially, just like a phrase. So it'll sound like this, because that's 4 measures. Okay, you just go right back and repeat. So let's try that a couple of times without going on to the next part, okay? Let's just do the first 4 measures as if we were repeating them 2 times in a row. Already begin, and I'm going to bring in the left hand lightly. So here we start just sort of filling in with lightly rolled triad solid chords. And what I mean by lightly rolled, you don't have to roll them. Play them as solid chords, of course. Remind myself, that's where it goes to the minor. Okay, here we go. Ready, begin. Okay, now let's do that again. One more time. And begin. Now let's move on, because here, when we get to the last 4 bars, it starts out the same way again. Exactly the same as the first 2 measures, but now we have the ending. And that's getting into the first ending, where it says number 1 on the last line. So it's simply G, 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 E, and now we go back to the repeat sign. Da, dee, da, 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 da. And now we come to the second ending, which is really the same as the first, except that now we've just extended the time of that second note to fill out that whole measure without the lead-in note. Because in the first ending has the same 2 lead-in notes that we always use to lead into a phrase of this tune. Okay? So here's how the whole B part will sound melodically. Now just do the melody. Down the big extended arpeggio. Now starts like the beginning. Now repeat just that last 4 measures. And we do something a little different with the chords, even though the melody is the same, essentially, on the 2 endings. So if you could hear that on the B part, we played all the way through 8 measures to the end, but then we went back to the halfway point where you see the repeat bar, repeat sign, and just played the second half of the B. So you could say it's got 2 A's and 1.5 B's would be a good way to describe the structure of this tune, Princess Augusta. It's majestic and stately tune. And so let's try playing that together, okay? And I'll sort of call out the repetitions of phrases. Again, thinking in terms because it works much the same way in the B part as it does in the A, where we've got 2-bar phrases. And you've got the first two, and then you've got the second two, and the next two are the same as the first two, and the last two are the ending. And the same thing happens on the B part. But then we have this anomaly of going back to the halfway point to repeat only the last 4 measures. So, so let's try that whole B part, and then we'll go into the left-hand part, which will be pretty simple. Okay. So together, we're starting again with those same old 2 lead-in notes, the high G and E, and then the first note of the measure. Here we go. Ready, begin. So that's the first section of 2 measures. Now down the big arpeggio. That's all slow notes. Now we come back to like the beginning. Next 2 measures, same as the first 2. Now the last 2 brings us to the ending. Okay, now we go back 4 measures and repeat the last 2 sections of 2 measures. Okay, so there you've got the whole tune, the whole melody. Now the left hand is pretty straightforward here, and you can start by using mostly just triad positions, or you can use all 4 fingers for big, if you have done exercises with the full 4-fingered arpeggio, or you can just play the 3-finger triad. Starts with the G triad. So just start this out with fingers 3, 2, 1, G, B, D, right? And these are all solid chords. So you go from G and immediately then down to E minor. You're dropping down a third, dropping down to E. And then you do another E minor. Sometimes I tie those 2 E minors to be one long sustaining chord. And then down 1 more to D. Okay, that takes you through the first 2 measures, right? Now you just go up the notes of a G triad with a long thumb note, a long D, as the melody, the 2 notes come together. It's kind of cool. You've got this counterpoint of left hand going upward in arpeggio, right hand going downward to meet it in the downward descending arpeggio. And then you have the and I'm not quite sure why those could both be written as just full 4-finger chords. Be a little easier. Don't have to think about an inversion like it appears. Just play 2 solid E minor chords. So what you have is this. Rest. 2 big solid E minors. Okay? And that takes you to the first 4 measures. Now, the next 4 measures, you don't go down to that E minor this time. You stay on the G several times. Straight down to D. That's the first 2 measures. Come back up to G. Except you come, guess what? Got that nice suspended chord again. Resolve. And now you go back to that repeat sign and you play those same solid chords, 3 Gs. Now at that ending, you could do the same suspended ending, suspended resolve. Sometimes I do. And then sometimes as a variation, I'll do that, hit that bass G, come up to the G triad, and resolve it on the D chord. it sounds like this altogether with the melody. Okay, here's the whole B part. Okay, very stately tune, and then you're back to the beginning. Okay, I guarantee that if you put forth the just a wee bit of effort you need to work on this piece, phrase by phrase, and try to memorize it. I do encourage all of you to memorize it. I know some of you are probably pretty good sight readers, and so sometimes the temptation is always have that music in front of you and just go ahead and sight read. Nothing wrong with that too, but there's also a little extra advantage to being able to have it completely memorized and not having to look at sheet music, but just simply zone into the piece, and you can play it very expressively once your fingers know it really well. And it's just a very satisfying piece to play. It's very lyrical, it's very stately. It's one of those pieces that I learned almost 40 years ago, and it's never, ever, ever left my repertoire. It's always been a part of what I play. If I just pick up the harp and I want to run through some tunes, it'll be one of the tunes that I play, just because it's a good kind of warm up the fingers with melody and chords. And it's just a lovely piece. And I hope you think so too, and I hope you enjoy it. And that takes us to the end of our time. So hopefully I gave you enough to be able to run with this piece and continue to work on it, because and what I'd like to do next week is to start the next tune, which will be Carolyn's variations on When She Can Bend. So here we go back to a melody. This is even a simpler melody than than the first one we did, Rory Dahl's Port. And it's in minor, and it's in actually relative to the key of C. And I have a new version of it to send out to you. I meant to get to this sooner. Avis has helped me out with this immensely. She very kindly transcribed the melody into the proper key, which I have, and I've started to chart the chords. I just didn't quite finish it. But in a couple of days, I'll have that done, and I'll send that out to you. So you have the notation at least. But you've also got the sound file that I sent. If anybody doesn't have anything or thinks they may not have something that I sent, because sometimes not all emails get through when I'm sending 20 at a time. And that's how many I have of you in the class. So just feel free to let me know at any time if you think there's something you missed out on, and I'll resend it to you. So that is that. That's the plan. So we'll start though the beginning of class next week by reviewing Princess Augusta, because I just know that all of you are going to spend hours and hours practicing this until you can play it at class next week, right? Now, don't worry if you can't. I understand totally how life goes, but do the best you can. We will review it, of course, and regardless at the beginning of next class, and then we'll start the next two When She Can Bend. Does anybody have any questions about anything we covered?
Do you think you'll have the next piece out before like Saturday, maybe Sunday? Because I'm going to go out of town and I won't have access to a printer after that.
Tell you what, just because you spoke up, I'll make sure you get it tomorrow. Okay, I'll send it out tomorrow.
Okay.
I was going to give myself a couple of days, but that's always dangerous.
Yeah, I understand. It's
So
just
I actually had, no, I do have it. I have it mostly done. I just have to finish charting. I just have to finish charting the chords on the variation. So I'm glad you spoke up. I definitely won't put it off. It won't take me that long to finish charting the chords, and I'll send that out to you, I promise. Okay. Any other questions or concerns?